The office door clicked shut behind Joanna with a sharp sound that echoed like a verdict. There, under the icy gaze of Mrs. Helena Albuquerque, surrounded by the cold gleam of imported furniture and the curious presence of the new maid who watched everything with an unreadable expression, Joanna felt the ground tremble beneath her bare feet in her worn-out slippers. The air conditioning chilled the room, but sweat trickled down her back. Her hands, always busy with cloths and mops, now didn't know where to rest. She crossed them in front of her body, an instinctive attempt to shield herself from what was coming. "Just confess, Joanna. You're the only one who goes into that room. The ring is missing, and I know it was you." The words fell on her like stones, each syllable heavy with accusation, contempt, and absolute certainty. Helena stood behind the mahogany desk, arms crossed, her face contorted in an expression mixing anger and disappointment. Beside her, Marta, the new maid, kept her eyes fixed on Joanna, like someone watching a show and not wanting to miss a single detail. Joanna opened her mouth, but her voice failed her at first. She felt her throat tighten, her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. Not here. Not in front of that woman who judged her without proof. Her fingers instinctively searched for the bead necklace around her neck, that thread of memory and protection her grandmother had left her before she passed. The beads were smooth, worn by time and constant touch, each one representing a prayer, a blessing, a piece of history. To touch that necklace was to touch the strength of the women who came before her, who survived worse storms. "Mrs. Albuquerque, I never—" she began, but her employer raised her hand in an imperious gesture, cutting her off like one swatting away an annoying insect. "I don't want to hear excuses, Joanna. I want my ring back. Either you give it back now, or I call the police. It's that simple. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for stories that move you every day." The silence that followed was deafening. Joanna felt the weight of that moment as never before. She looked around, at the French silk curtains she had washed by hand with such care, at the Carrara marble floor she had scrubbed on her knees countless times, at the gold-framed pictures she dusted with a soft cloth every week, at the bookshelf she was never invited to touch beyond cleaning. 3 years of honest work, impeccable punctuality, silent dedication, evaporating before an accusation without proof, sustained only by the color of her skin and the invisibility of her status. That's how it worked, she knew. A suspicion, a mistrust born of old and deep-seated prejudices, was enough to make all the built-up trust crumble like sand through fingers. She felt something break inside her chest. A sharp pain that spread through her ribs, rose to her throat, threatened to explode into sobs. But Joanna held her head high. She took a deep breath, seeking strength where she always found it. In her grandmother's memory, in the stories of resilience that lulled her childhood, in the certainty that her dignity didn't depend on others' recognition. "I didn't take anything, Mrs. Albuquerque," she said, her voice low but firm, carrying a dignity that no humiliation could strip away. "The only things I carry are the marks of what was taken from me. But steal, never. You can search my things. You can call whoever you want. You won't find anything because I didn't take it." Helena narrowed her eyes, as if Joanna's firmness was an added insult. "You have the nerve to look me in the eye and lie. After everything I've done for you? Paid Social Security, on-time salary. I even gave you grocery baskets." Her employer spoke, as if bestowing favors, as if Joanna's work didn't deserve fair compensation, as if dignity were a gift she, Helena, generously offered. "I worked for all of that, Mrs. Albuquerque," Joanna replied, and for the first time in 3 years, she allowed her employer to see something beyond the submissive, silent maid. "I cleaned, I cooked, I washed, I ironed. I took care of this house as if it were my own. But respect that you never truly gave me, and now you accuse me without proof, just because it's easier to believe a woman like me is capable of stealing than to properly look for what you lost." The air in the room grew even more tense. Marta's eyes widened, surprised by Joanna's audacity. Helena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her face turned red with indignation. "How dare you speak to me like that? You're fired! Pack your things and get out of my house immediately, and be grateful I'm not calling the police right now." The sentence fell like a guillotine. Joanna felt her legs weaken, but she didn't let anyone see. She nodded slowly, turned, and walked to the door with firm steps, though inside she felt her world crumbling. She left the office under Marta's silent gaze, who now avoided looking directly at her, as if suddenly showing a peculiar interest in her own shoes. Joanna crossed the hallway with its gleaming floor, passed through the living room, where she had so many times fluffed pillows and polished mirrors, and headed to the small room in the back where she kept her belongings. There, she sat for a moment on the old chair and allowed her hands to tremble. She looked at her own hands, calloused, marked by work, hands that knew every inch of that house better than its owners. She gathered her belongings with care. There weren't many. An old fabric bag her sister had given her years ago, a worn coat for cold days, the empty lunchbox she brought from home every day, a broken comb, a faded photo of her family gathered on a distant Christmas. Simple objects that told the story of a lifetime of simplicity and honesty. Before leaving, she took the bead necklace from her neck and held it tightly, pressing it against her chest. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, as if her grandmother could hear her across time and space. "Grandma, give me strength. You always said I should never hang my head, so I won't. But I need the strength to bear this." For a moment, she felt the warmth of an invisible hand on her shoulder, the scent of lavender her grandmother always wore, the hoarse, wise voice saying that everything would pass. She took a deep breath, put the necklace back on, and stood up. She left through the back door, the one she had always entered through for 3 years. She was never invited to use the front door, of course. That was reserved for visitors, for important people, for those who deserved to be seen coming and going. Joanna was part of what was meant to remain invisible, functional, discreet, up until it was convenient to make her visible for blame. She carried on her shoulders the weight of an injustice she knew well, recognized as an old traveling companion, but which never, ever stopped hurting. Because no matter how accustomed she became to prejudice, to suspicion, to disrespect, each new wound burned as if it were the first, and this perhaps was the deepest of all. Not just the false accusation, but the speed with which she had been discarded, as if 3 years of honest work meant absolutely nothing. She walked down the tree-lined street of the upscale neighborhood, where the houses had manicured gardens and high walls. Some neighbors saw her pass, and Joanna noticed the sideways glances, the disguised whispers. She knew the news was already starting to spread, as it always did. In places like this, walls had ears, and gossip traveled faster than truth. Joanna Silva had arrived at the Albuquerque mansion 3 years earlier, bringing with her little more than hope and urgent need. Coming from the interior of Bahia, she had left behind the red earth that clung to the bare feet of children, the unmistakable scent of palm oil that permeated the streets of her village. The simple adobe house where she had grown up alongside 6 siblings in a dignified poverty that was not ashamed of itself. There, everyone was poor, but rich in community, in solidarity, in sharing. No one went hungry alone. If one planted cassava, they shared with the neighbor. If another fished in the river, they brought fish for those who needed it. It was a different kind of poverty than what she would find in the big city, less lonely, less cruel, less indifferent. Her grandmother, Donna Benedita, had been a respected healer in the region, known for her potent prayers and her hands that healed everything from infant colic to adult evil eye. She had an altar at home with images of Catholic saints and oryxars side by side, in a syncretic faith that saw no contradiction, only multiple truths. It was she who had raised Joanna after her mother died in childbirth with the 7th child. teaching her early on the value of dignity, of keeping one's word, of honesty that could not be compromised. "They can take everything from us, child," she would say, gently brushing her granddaughter's hair. "But no one can steal your soul if you don't give it away. Never lower your head, you hear? Those who carry their ancestors in their soul don't bow to anyone." Joanna heard those words like a mantra, and they were etched deep in her heart, becoming part of her structure, her backbone. Her grandmother had died a few months before Joanna decided to leave for São Paulo, taken by a silent cancer that consumed her quickly. In her final days, she called her granddaughter to her bedside and, with trembling hands but a firm purpose, removed the colorful bead necklace she always wore from her own neck. Each bead had a story, represented protection, carried the energy of generations. "Take this with you, wherever you go," she whispered, her voice already weak. "When you feel alone, hold these beads and remember you are never alone. We are all here, me, your mother, your great-grandmother, all who came before. We are your roots, child, and roots are not easily torn out." Joanna cried a lot that day, and in the days that followed. She buried her grandmother in the small village cemetery in a simple ceremony attended by dozens of people who had been blessed, healed, and welcomed by Donna Benedita. But São Paulo called to her with the promise of work, a steady salary, the possibility of helping the siblings she was leaving behind. And so, with a heavy heart but firm determination, she left. Her arrival in the big city was a brutal shock. The deafening roar of traffic, the indifferent crowds rushing through the streets without looking at each other, the coldness of relationships, the loneliness in the midst of millions of people. Joanna felt lost as never before. She initially stayed at the home of a distant cousin who lived on the outskirts of the East Zone, in a wooden shack where 8 people lived in 3 tiny rooms. There, she began to look for work. She knocked on dozens of doors, answered countless ads, faced humiliating interviews where she was asked if she had good looks to work as a domestic helper, as if the dignity of labor depended on the aesthetics of the person performing it. She heard many no's, many "we'll call you's" that never materialized, many eloquent silences. It was through an acquaintance of her cousin that she got the referral for the position at the Albuquerque house. "They're looking for someone trustworthy, who lives nearby and can work 6 days a week," the acquaintance explained. "They pay on time, have benefits, are good people." Good people. Joanna didn't yet know what that expression truly meant, but she would soon learn. Good people were those who paid the minimum required by law, who treated employees with cold politeness when it suited them and with contempt when they felt contradicted. But a job was a job, and she needed it. She presented herself at the mansion on a Monday morning, wearing her best outfit, which still looked poor compared to the surrounding luxury. Helena interviewed her quickly, asked practical questions about previous experience, references, availability. Joanna answered honestly, showing her calloused hands as proof that she knew how to work. She was hired the same day. The first few months were an intense period of adjustment. She woke up at 4:30 in the morning, still in the dark, got ready quickly in the small rented room she managed to afford after saving her first few pennies, and took 2 buses to cross the city. She always arrived at the mansion at 6:30, precisely on time, and began the routine that soon became automatic, opening the windows to air out the house, preparing the family's breakfast, starting the cleaning with the bedrooms, then the living room, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the outdoor area. Each space had its specific requirements. The marble floor in the living room needed to be washed with a special cleaner and a soft cloth to avoid scratches. The fine china in the display cabinet required extreme care. The family's clothes had detailed washing instructions, some by hand, others in the washing machine on a delicate cycle, all ironed with millimeter precision. The Egyptian cotton sheets needed to be changed every 2 days and ironed while still slightly damp to be as smooth as paper. Joanna learned everything quickly, with the same dedication her grandmother had taught her to bless and pray, as if performing a sacred act. She transformed manual labor into a ritual of dignity. She cleaned not just to earn her salary, but to honor her own existence, to prove to herself that she was capable, competent, deserving of respect. She spoke little, observed much. She soon understood the dynamics of that house. Mr. Edmundo was absent, always traveling for work or locked in his office for endless video conferences. Helena ran the household with an iron fist clad in impeccable nail polish, demanding in every detail, stingy with praise and generous with criticism. "Joanna, this glass still has a smudge. Joanna, the food is bland. Joanna, you took too long today." Never a thank you, never a "you did a good job." Only demands, pointed criticisms, corrections. Joanna accepted it all in silence, took a deep breath, clutched the beaded necklace beneath her uniform, and carried on. Then there was Caio, the couple's son, and he was the luminous exception in that cold house, a 6-year-old boy with curious eyes, an easy smile, and an open heart. He was the only one who treated Joanna like a person, like someone with a name, a history, feelings. "Aunt Joanna, good morning. Did you sleep well? Aunt Joanna, are you making chocolate fudge today? Your fudge is the best in the world. Aunt Joanna, can you teach me how to make that cornmeal cake you brought the other day?" Joanna would smile at the boy with genuine tenderness, seeing in him an innocence not yet corrupted by adult prejudice. She cherished those moments, like one collects light on cloudy days, like one stores warmth for harsh winters. Sometimes, when Helena was out, Caio would sit in the kitchen and chat while Joanna cooked. He'd tell stories about school, about friends, about his favorite cartoons. And Joanna would listen intently, ask questions, laugh at his childish jokes. In those moments, she'd forget the hardships of her life and simply exist in the present, in the simplicity of affection. But not everything was peaceful in the Albuquerque mansion. There were submerged tensions, dangerous currents beneath the seemingly calm surface of that routine. And those tensions had a name: Marta. The new housekeeper had been hired 3 months prior to help with the heavy cleaning, as the house was too large for one person alone. Young, from a small town in rural Ohio, Marta had arrived hungry for advancement, with that ambitious glint in her eyes of someone willing to do anything to stand out, to climb the ladder, even if it meant stepping on those beside her. From day one, she observed Joanna with a mixture of barely disguised envy and calculated suspicion. Envy because she saw that, despite all of Helena's harshness, there was a tacit respect for Joanna's competence, for the fact that she knew every corner of that house, every preference of the family, every right way to do things. Suspicion because, in the cruel logic of survival among the oppressed, it's sometimes easier to attack those beside you than to confront those above. Marta started subtly, with little insinuations, seemingly innocent comments that planted seeds of doubt. "Mrs. Albuquerque, I think we're out of sugar in the pantry. I was sure there were 2 bags yesterday." "Mrs. Albuquerque, the pantry door was open again this morning. I don't know who left it that way." Never direct accusations, always half-truths, always suggestions that left suspicion hanging in the air. Helena, too busy to investigate thoroughly, mentally noted those observations, and they accumulated like small stones that, together, began to form a wall of distrust. Joanna perceived it all, of course. She wasn't naive. She knew that game. She'd seen it before, in other houses, in other situations. The cruel competition among those with little, encouraged by those with much. Divide and conquer, fostering rivalry among the staff, so they never unite, never recognize that the problem isn't among them, but in the system that oppresses them equally. But Joanna had chosen not to retaliate. First, because retaliating would mean stooping to the same level, and her grandmother had never taught her that. Second, because she knew some battles weren't worth fighting, that wasting energy on petty provocations was squandering strength she needed for bigger challenges. So she continued her work with the same dedication as always, ignored Marta's sidelong glances, responded with monosyllables when necessary, and maintained her distance. But this strategy of non-confrontation came at a cost. The atmosphere grew increasingly heavy, charged with unsaid tensions. The kitchen, which had once been her refuge where she'd hummed softly while preparing meals, transformed into a minefield where every movement was observed, every action interpreted. The silence was no longer peace, but oppression. Joanna felt the growing weight on her shoulders, the pressure coming from all sides. She returned home exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally drained. Mrs. Selina, the elderly neighbor who lived in the small apartment next to her rented room, noticed the change. "Honey, you've had a long face for weeks. What's going on?" Joanna, sitting on the doorstep on a warm evening, looked up at the sparse stars that managed to pierce the city's pollution and sighed. "It's work, Mrs. Selina. There's a new girl there who, I don't know. She doesn't leave me alone. She keeps making things up, gossiping, creating problems where there are none, and I feel like the boss is starting to believe her." The old woman shook her head, familiar with life and its cruelties. "You're an honest girl, honey. Always have been. Anyone with eyes to see can tell that. But not everyone wants to see. Sometimes it's easier to believe a lie that confirms what they already thought than to accept the truth that challenges their prejudices." She held Joanna's hands between her own, hands also calloused by a lifetime of work. "But you have a light, child. Don't let this world put it out. Don't let these small-minded people steal your peace." Joanna wanted to believe those words, wanted to trust that her honesty would speak for itself. But deep down, an old, wise intuition whispered that the storm was near, that something was about to happen. She felt it in the way Helena looked at her lately, no longer with her usual indifference, but with something different, a growing suspicion, a constant vigilance. She felt it in the way Marta smiled when she entered the room, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, that hid malicious satisfaction. She felt it in the very air of the house, which seemed to have become denser, harder to breathe. But what could she do? Defend herself from what, exactly? From vague insinuations, from sidelong glances, from a discomfort that had no name or defined shape. She continued to work, because that's what she knew how to do. She continued to be punctual, honest, dedicated, because that's who she was. And she continued to pray every night, clutching her beaded necklace and asking for protection, strength, wisdom. She prayed that truth would always be her ally, that her integrity would be her shield, that justice somehow would prevail. She had no idea that she would soon be tested in a way she had never experienced before. She had no idea that the suspicion she felt in the air was about to materialize in the cruelest possible form. "I never imagined that a seemingly ordinary Thursday would be the day my life turned upside down. The storm I'd sensed was finally arriving, and when it did, it would hit with the devastating force of a hurricane, tearing away everything I thought was secure, exposing me to an injustice as brutal as it was ancient. And it would all begin with a diamond ring that mysteriously vanished, taking with it not just its material value, but the reputation, dignity, and peace of a woman who had never harmed a soul. Fate sometimes tests precisely those who have already been tested too much. And Joanna was about to discover once again that to carry history in your soul means also carrying the weight of centuries of recurring injustices, repeating generation after generation, changing form, but never essence. The week leading up to the ring's disappearance had been particularly rough. Helena had been more on edge than usual, burdened by problems Joanna didn't know about, mounting debts, investments gone south, the need to maintain an appearance of wealth even as the coffers dwindled. Her husband, Edmund, had traveled abroad on a desperate mission to close deals that would save the family business. The domestic tension rose in direct proportion to the financial strain, and employees are always the first to feel the consequences of their employer's stress. Helena was more demanding, more critical, more insistent. Nothing was good enough. The food lacked seasoning. The house wasn't clean enough. The clothes weren't pressed well enough. Joanna endured it all in silence, but felt the weariness accumulating in her bones, the emotional exhaustion weighing heavier than the physical. And then came that cursed Thursday, when Helena frantically searched for the diamond ring her husband had given her for their anniversary. The ring that was worth a fortune, that represented status and love, that had suddenly vanished without a trace. The desperate search, the rifling through drawers and closets, the escalating panic, and finally, inevitably, the question Joanna dreaded but deep down expected. "Where is my ring, Joanna?" The storm broke on a Thursday morning, a day that had started like any other. Joanna had arrived promptly at 6:30, prepared breakfast, and begun her daily cleaning. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the gleaming floors, creating the almost sterile perfection Helena so valued. Everything seemed normal until the moment the madam of the house came hurrying down the stairs, still in her robe, her hair disheveled, a look of panic etched on her face. "Joanna, Marta, you two, get up here now!" The tone of her voice allowed for no delay. The two domestic workers dropped what they were doing and presented themselves immediately. Helena paced the living room, her hands trembling slightly, her face pale. "My ring is gone. The diamond ring my husband gave me. Did you see it? Did someone come into my room?" Joanna and Marta exchanged a quick glance. "No, Mrs. Helena," they replied, almost in unison. "I cleaned the room yesterday as usual," Joanna added, "but I didn't see any ring out of place." Helena didn't seem to truly hear her. Her mind was already elsewhere, following a line of reasoning Joanna recognized instantly, and that sent a chill down her spine. "Search everything, look in every corner, now." The two employees obeyed, joining the frantic search. They rummaged through drawers, peered inside shoes, checked under furniture, inspected every nook and cranny of the master bedroom. Nothing. The ring had simply vanished. Marta, sensing an opportunity, planted a seed with the subtlety of a serpent. "Mrs. Helena, have you checked, who had access to the room in the last few days?" She paused meaningfully, leaving the question hanging in the air, poisoned by the unspoken insinuation. Helena caught on immediately. Her eyes turned to Joanna with an intensity that made her step back involuntarily. "Joanna, you're the only one who enters this room regularly. The only one who handles my things, who opens my drawers to put away clean clothes." Joanna felt her heart pound. The accusation hadn't been voiced explicitly yet, but it was there, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. "Mrs. Helena, I've never taken anything that wasn't mine. You know that. I've worked here for 3 years and never—" "3 years," Helena interrupted, her voice turning icy. "3 years in which I trusted you, in which I let you into the most intimate places in my home. And now this. But I didn't do anything." Joanna's voice came out louder than she intended, laden with desperation and indignation. "Please, you have to believe me." Helena crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. Her mind had already made up, driven by a fatal combination of panic, prejudice, and Marta's venomous suggestion. "Come with me to the office. Now!" And so it was that Joanna found herself back in that room, facing the mahogany desk under her employer's accusing gaze and Marta's curious eyes. It was there that the accusation finally came, explicit, devastating, impossible to deflect. "Just confess, Joanna. You're the only one who enters that room. The ring is gone, and I know it was you." The words fell like an axe. Joanna tried to argue, tried to defend herself, tried to appeal to 3 years of honest work. But every word she spoke was cut off, disqualified, ignored. Helena didn't want explanations. She wanted a confession, or rather, she wanted someone to blame. And Joanna, by the color of her skin, by her social standing, by the invisibility that had made her useful until now, was the perfect culprit. "I trust you, Joanna, but this ring is worth a lot. If you took it, give it back now and we'll forget about it. I won't call the police if you return it." The perverse logic was all there. Accusation without proof, presumed guilt, an offer of mercy conditioned on the confession of a non-existent crime. Joanna recognized that pattern. She'd seen it happen to other black women, other domestic workers, other people invisible until they became convenient scapegoats. She felt her legs weaken, felt the world shrink around her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to slam her fist on the table and demand respect. But deep down, she knew none of it would do any good. She was alone against power, her word against that of a wealthy employer in a society that had already decided centuries ago who to believe in these situations. So she did the only thing she could. She maintained her dignity. She held her head high, looked Helena in the eye, touched the beaded necklace at her neck, and replied in a firm, albeit low voice, "I didn't take anything, Mrs. Helena. Look carefully. The truth always comes out. Always." Helena interpreted that firmness as insolence, as a refusal to cooperate. Her face flushed with anger. "Then get out of my house, now. I don't want you here. You're fired. And thank your lucky stars I'm not calling the police." Joanna nodded slowly. There was nothing more to say. No words would change this situation. She turned and left the office with steps she tried to keep steady, though inside she felt everything crumbling. She gathered her belongings in the small back room. There wasn't much. Her old purse, a worn-out coat, the empty lunchbox, a few personal items of little value. Objects that told the story of a simple, honest, dignified life. Before leaving, she clutched the beaded necklace tightly, closed her eyes, and sought her grandmother's presence. "Grandma, give me strength. You always said I should never hang my head, so I won't. But I need strength to endure this." For a moment, in the silence of that small room where she had spent so many hours over 3 years, she thought she heard her grandmother's voice responding, "You're stronger than you think, child. You've weathered storms before. You'll get through this one too, and you'll walk away with your head held high because that's who you are." She took a deep breath, wiped away the tears that finally streamed freely down her face, and put the necklace back around her neck. Then she stood up and left. She walked to the back door, the one she always used to enter. Never the front door, of course. That was for important people, for those who deserved to be seen. Domestic workers like her had their own entrance, their own side steps, their own well-defined place in the house's spatial hierarchy. She crossed the yard one last time, past the garden she had watered so many times, the clothesline where she had hung so much laundry to dry. Every corner of that outdoor space held memories of work, sweat, dedication, but also of small moments of peace. The birdsong in the early morning, the scent of the flowers she had planted herself one afternoon, when Helena had allowed it, the cool shade under the oak tree where she sometimes sat to eat lunch. She opened the iron gate and stepped out onto the street. The sun was high, the day was hot. The tree-lined, quiet street in the affluent neighborhood contrasted violently with the internal turmoil she felt. She began walking towards the bus stop, carrying on her back not just the bag with her belongings, but the crushing weight of an injustice she knew all too well. Some neighbors were out. A woman watering plants, a doorman washing the sidewalk, a nanny pushing a stroller. They all saw her pass, and Joanna noticed, oh, how she noticed, the sideways glances, the disguised whispers, the heads that huddled together as soon as she was out of earshot. The news was already starting to spread, as it always happened in places like this. Walls had ears, gossip traveled faster than the truth, and the version that would stick would always be the same. The Albuquerque maid was caught stealing. I always suspected her. Those people, you know how they are. Joanna heard the whispers even without hearing the exact words. She knew that narrative by heart. She'd heard it before, applied to other women like her. Black, poor domestics, invisible until the moment they became guilty, then suddenly visible, exposed, judged, and condemned without a right to defense. She reached the bus stop with trembling legs, sat on the dirty bench, and let her bag drop beside her. For a few minutes, she just sat there, looking at the street's movement without really seeing anything. Her mind was elsewhere, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years of honest work, impeccable punctuality, absolute dedication, evaporated in a single moment. An accusation without proof, based solely on assumption and prejudice, had been enough to destroy everything. The bus took half an hour to arrive. Half an hour in which Joanna remained seated on that bench, exposed to the hot sun and the gazes of passers-by. Some recognized her from seeing her every day at that time, always going to or coming from work. They were surprised to see her there in the middle of the morning with that devastated expression on her face. But no one asked, no one approached. Urban indifference did its efficient work of isolation. When she finally boarded the crowded bus, she had to stand, holding onto the railing, her bag pressed against her body. The trip back home, that rented room on the outskirts, took almost 2 hours, crossing the city from one end to the other, from the wealthy, tree-lined neighborhood to the poor, forgotten community. With every mile, Joanna felt the contrast increase. The wide, clean streets gave way to narrow alleys, the houses with gardens transformed into shacks of precarious wood and brick. The ordered silence yielded to the chaotic noise of children playing, loud music, street vendors, barking dogs. 2 worlds separated by a few miles and an unbridgeable social chasm. She got off the bus at the last stop and walked the final meters to her house. Her legs felt like lead, her heart tight in her chest. Donna Celina was sweeping the sidewalk when she saw her arrive. The old woman immediately realized something was wrong. "Child, what happened? Shouldn't you be at work?" Joanna tried to answer, but her voice failed. The tears she had held back all morning finally burst forth. She collapsed into her neighbor's arms, sobbing convulsively, weeping as she hadn't allowed herself to for years. Donna Celina took her inside, sat her in an old chair, prepared a sweet, hot tea. She waited patiently until Joanna could speak. And then, between sobs and pauses, the whole story came out. The accusation, the humiliation, the summary dismissal, the neighbor's stares, the certainty that her reputation was destroyed. "She accused me of stealing, Donna Celina. With no proof at all, just because the ring went missing and I'm the maid. 3 years of honest work meant nothing, nothing." The old woman held Joanna's hands in hers, squeezing them tightly. Her eyes, though blurred by age, shone with deep understanding. "I know, child. I know because I've been through it. My mother went through it. My grandmother went through it. It's always like this for us. As soon as something goes missing, the blame falls on the maid, especially if she's black. We're born suspected, child, but listen carefully to what I'm telling you. You are innocent, you know it, I know it, God knows it, and one day that woman will know it too. The truth always comes to light, child. Always." Joanna wanted to believe those words. But at that moment, hope seemed distant, unattainable. And what if it doesn't, Donna Celina? What if everyone believes I stole? How will I find another job with this story on my back? Who will give me a chance? The questions came out laden with desperation. The old woman sighed deeply. "You'll figure it out, child. You'll find a way." Because that's what we always do. We figure it out. We get up, brush ourselves off, and keep going. It's what our grandmothers did, it's what our mothers did, it's what we do. Not because it's easy, but because we have no choice. And you've got strength, Joanna. More than you know. This storm will pass. Joanna looked at the older woman with immense gratitude. In that moment of total abandonment, she found comfort where she always had. Among her own, among those who shared the same struggle, the same pain, the same resilience. Now you're going to eat something, take a shower and rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. But today, you need to take care of yourself. You hear?" Joanna nodded, too exhausted to argue. She spent the next few days shut in her little room, alternating between moments of intense crying and periods of emotional numbness. She didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. She felt ashamed, even though she knew rationally there was no reason to. Shame is like that. It doesn't need a logical reason to exist. It feeds on the gaze of others, on social condemnation, on a stain on your reputation that doesn't wash out easily. Donna Selina knocked on her door every day, bringing food that Joanna barely touched, sitting beside her in silent solidarity. Sometimes she prayed softly. Sometimes she just held her hand. The old woman's quiet presence was the only solace in those dark days. At night, when the community finally quieted down and only the distant sound of some party or the occasional bark of dogs remained, Joanna would light a candle in front of her grandmother's portrait. It was an old, faded photo taken years ago at a holiday party. Donna Benedita appeared smiling, wearing the same beaded necklace that Joanna now wore around her neck. She looked at that beloved face and whispered, "Grandma, give me strength. I don't know if I can handle this. It hurts too much." She clutched the beaded necklace, running her fingers over the smooth, worn beads, and tried to find in her ancestors the strength she lacked within herself. She recited the prayers her grandmother had taught her, a mix of Catholic Hail Marys and pleas to the Orishas, a syncretic faith that saw no contradiction, but rather complementarity. She prayed for justice, prayed for the truth to come out, prayed for the strength to continue. But above all, she asked for one thing. "Don't let me lose my dignity, Grandma. They can take my job, they can tarnish my name, they can humiliate me, but my dignity, that they can't. Help me keep my dignity intact." And that was what kept her alive in those terrible days, the certainty that, no matter what others thought, she knew her own truth. She knew she hadn't stolen anything. She knew her conscience was clear. She knew she had worked honestly all those years. That inner certainty, while not taking away the pain, offered firm ground to plant her feet, an internal place to retreat to when the outside world became unbearable. But even that refuge had its limits. There were moments when doubt assailed her, not about her innocence, but about the value of remaining integrity in a world that punished it. What's the point of being honest if they accuse you of the same thing in the end? The question arose in sleepless dawns, when the darkness of the little room mirrored the darkness of her soul. What's the point of working right if it makes no difference in the end? These were dangerous thoughts, threatening the very foundation of who she was. Joanna fought against them as if fighting an invisible enemy, because she knew that if she succumbed to that kind of thinking, Helena would have truly won, not just by taking her job, but by destroying her faith in the dignity of honest work, her belief in the importance of integrity, and that, in fact, would be a definitive defeat. So every morning, even when her body screamed to stay in bed, even when her mind begged her to give up, Joanna would get up. She would wash her face, dress herself, comb her hair, small acts of resistance, of refusal to let herself be destroyed. She didn't leave her little room. She still didn't have the courage to face the looks of the community, which surely already knew the story, but she prepared herself as if she were going out, as if the simple act of maintaining appearances was a way of maintaining her sanity. Donna Selina brought news from the outside world. "People are talking, yes, but some people don't believe it, you know. Donna Maria said you were always upright, that this doesn't make sense. So Jose also defended you yesterday at the store." Small mercies that warmed her heart. But there were also the others, those who readily believed the version of guilt, those who felt a perverse satisfaction in seeing someone fall. "I always suspected," someone would say. "Those girls who work in rich people's houses, they always end up going astray," another would comment. The community, like any community, was divided. But for Joanna, in that fragile moment, every negative comment was an additional stab. She started having nightmares. She dreamed she was trapped behind bars, screaming her innocence while everyone ignored her. She dreamed of Helena pointing an accusing finger, multiplied into thousands of Helenas surrounding her. She dreamed of the diamond ring pursuing her, shining like an evil eye. She would wake up sweating, gasping for air, her heart pounding. And always, she would reach for the beaded necklace around her neck, gripping it tightly until her heart calmed down, until her breathing returned to normal. The truth emerged where no one expected it, in the most innocent way possible. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, almost 2 weeks after Joanna's dismissal. Caio, the Albuquerque's 6-year-old son, was playing in the yard under the distracted gaze of the new nanny they had hired. The boy had a toy box that was his personal treasure: little cars, action figures, Lego pieces, shiny objects he collected like a little Dragon Guard's treasure. That day, he decided to play Wedding, a game he had invented after watching a princess movie. He needed a ring for the imaginary ceremony. He rummaged through the box looking for something suitable, and at the bottom, beneath layers of forgotten toys, his fingers found something cold and shiny: his mother's diamond ring. He had completely forgotten he had taken it weeks ago, one morning when he had gone into his parents' room while Helena was in the shower. He had seen the ring sparkling on the dressing table and couldn't resist. For a 6-year-old, there was no concept of monetary value or consequence. It was just something pretty he wanted to wear in his game. "Look, Auntie, I found Mommy's ring." He showed it excitedly to the nanny, who was sitting on a bench scrolling through her phone. The young woman looked up distractedly, saw the ring in the boy's dirty hand, and froze. Even she, new to the job, knew the story of the stolen ring. The maid fired under suspicion. "Caio, where did you find that?" Her voice came out strange, high-pitched. The boy, innocent, replied, without realizing the gravity of the situation. "It was in my toy box. I took it a while ago to play with. Aunt Joanna always said weddings are beautiful and need a ring. Can I keep it?" The nanny felt her stomach churn. "No, Caio. That belongs to your mother. It's very important. She's been looking for it." "Come on, let's show her now." She took the boy by the hand, picked up the ring with the care one uses when handling evidence of a crime, which in fact it was, and walked quickly into the house. Helena was in her office, reviewing bills with that tense expression that had become permanent in recent weeks. The loss of the ring added to the financial problems, creating constant pressure. When the nanny knocked, Helena looked up, irritated by the interruption. "What is it?" "Mrs. Helena," the nanny's voice trembled, "I found the ring. Caio had it." The silence that followed was absolute. Helena looked at the nanny as if she had spoken a foreign language, not comprehending the words. Then her eyes fell on the girl's outstretched hand, on the diamond ring that sparkled under the chandelier's light. Her ring, the ring that had disappeared, the ring for which she had accused, humiliated, and fired Joanna. She rose slowly, staggering, and took the ring with trembling hands. Where did you find it?" "Caio had it, Mrs. Helena. It was in his toy box. He said he took it a few weeks ago to play Wedding." The reality crashed down on Helena like an avalanche. Her son. It had been her own son in his childish innocence who had taken the ring. And she, driven by panic and prejudice, had accused Joanna. Joanna, who had worked honestly for 3 years. Joanna, who had never given cause for suspicion. Joanna, who was now at home, unemployed, humiliated, her reputation destroyed. All because of a false accusation she, Helena, had made without proof. She felt her legs weaken. She sat down heavily in her chair, looked at the ring in her hand, and then at her son, who had entered the office, jumping excitedly, oblivious to the storm he had caused. "Caio?" Her voice came out strange, choked. "Did you take Mommy's ring?" The boy stopped jumping, finally realizing something was wrong. I did, but I was going to give it back, Mommy. I just wanted to play. Aunt Joanna always said weddings need a pretty ring. Joanna's name in her son's innocent words was like a slap in the face. Helena sent the boy out, asking the nanny to take him to his room. When she was alone, she rested her elbows on the desk and buried her face in her hands. Guilt came quickly, violently, unbearably. It wasn't just the error in judgment. It was the ease with which she had believed in Joanna's guilt, the speed with which she had condemned her. The prejudice that, she now saw clearly, had influenced her decision. If it had been the nanny, young and white, would she have accused so readily? If it had been someone from her family, would she have investigated further before concluding? But because it was Joanna, black, poor, a domestic worker, suspicion had turned into certainty without the need for proof. Helena cried. She cried for the injustice she had committed. She cried for the shame she felt. She cried because there was no way to undo what she had done, to erase the humiliation she had caused. Her Edmundo arrived home that night. He was returning from a business trip, tired, bringing more financial problems with him. He found his wife in the bedroom, her eyes red, holding the recovered ring. "Did you find the ring?" That was the first thing he said, relieved. "Thank God. Where was it?" Helena looked at him, and the shame burned even stronger. "Caio had it. He took it weeks ago. It was in his toy box." Edmundo took a few seconds to process. Then the memory returned. "But didn't you fire Joanna because of that? Didn't you accuse her of stealing?" Helena nodded, unable to speak. "My God, Helena!" His voice rose, filled with anger and disbelief. "How could you accuse that woman without proof? How could you destroy her life based on a supposition?" I was desperate. The ring was worth so much, and only she went into the room and she was the black maid, wasn't she?" Edmundo cut in, verbalizing what Helena didn't want to admit. "So it was easy to believe, easy to accuse. My God, what a terrible thing you did." The argument was long and painful. Edmundo was furious, not just at the unjust accusation, but at the ease with which his wife had assumed Joanna's guilt. Helena had no defense, only tears and the heavy conscience of someone who had committed an irreparable injustice. She couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in bed, tormented by the memory of Joanna's face at the moment of accusation. That serene, wounded, but never submissive look. The choked voice saying, "All I carry are the marks of what they took from me." Why hadn't she truly heard those words? Why hadn't she investigated more before accusing? She dreamed of Joanna. In the dream, the maid was in a courtroom, pointing at her, Helena, and saying, "You judged me without knowing me. You condemned me for my color." She woke up sweating, her heart pounding, the guilt transformed into a physical weight on her chest. She spent the following days trying to decide what to do. Her Edmundo insisted, "You need to apologize. You need to go to her and admit your mistake." But Helena was afraid of confrontation, afraid of looking Joanna in the eyes and seeing the condemnation she deserved, afraid of not being forgiven. It would be easier to pretend nothing happened, hire another maid, move on. But her conscience wouldn't let her. The nightmares continued every night. Finally, on a rainy afternoon, she gathered her courage. She bought a box of fine chocolates, took the recovered ring, and got Joanna's address from someone in the community. Driving to the outskirts was a revealing experience. She had never been to that part of town. The dirt roads turned to mud with the rain. The simple houses contrasted violently with the mansion where she lived. Children played barefoot in the street. There was life there, community, but there was also obvious poverty, stark need. She parked her imported car at the entrance to the community, she didn't dare drive into it, and walked to the indicated address. People looked curiously at this wealthy woman, clearly out of her element. Some commented, others just watched. Helena felt exposed, vulnerable, out of place. A tiny fraction of what Joanna must feel every day working in her house, being judged, evaluated, presumed guilty. She found the house, a simple room next to Donna Selina's larger house. She knocked on the door with a trembling hand. An old woman answered, looking at her with obvious suspicion. "Who are you?" "I'm Helena Albuquerque. I need to speak with Joanna." The old woman crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "Haven't you done enough harm already?" The accusation in her words burned, but before Helena could answer, Joanna appeared behind Mrs. Selina, calm, dignified as always. "It's okay, Mrs. Selina. Let her in." Joanna stepped aside, allowing Helena to enter the small, simple room. The contrast was stark. There were no mahogany furniture or marble floors here, just a narrow bed, a small table, 2 old chairs, a 2-burner hot plate, a shelf with a few utensils. But there was something the Albuquerque mansion lacked: palpable dignity, the kind that comes from living by one's principles. Joanna gestured to one of the chairs. Helena sat down, feeling smaller than ever. She placed the box of chocolates on the table, holding the ring in her hands. Mrs. Selina remained leaning against the door, arms crossed, watching every move. Helena opened her mouth to speak, but her voice faltered on the first attempt. She cleared her throat, tried again. I came because..." The tears came before the words. She began to cry, sobs shaking her entire body. "Forgive me, please forgive me. The ring, it was Caio. My son took it to play with. It was in his toy box. I was terribly wrong. I accused you without proof. I destroyed your reputation, took your job, humiliated you, and you were innocent. You were always innocent." Joanna remained still, her face serene as a mask. Her fingers instinctively sought the beaded necklace at her throat, that gesture Helena now understood as a search for ancestral strength. She let Helena cry for a few moments before speaking. When she finally did, her voice was low but firm, imbued with a dignity that the humiliation had failed to break. "I always knew I was innocent, Mrs. Helena. I never needed anyone to tell me that. You were the one who needed to know. And now you do." Helena raised her tear-reddened eyes. "I know. And I'm so ashamed. I have no excuse. It was prejudice. It was desperation. It was everything that's wrong with me. How can I make amends? How can I fix this?" Joanna took a deep breath, looking at the woman before her, a powerful, wealthy woman, accustomed to giving orders, now reduced, vulnerable, pleading. She felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger, yes. Pain, certainly. But also, surprisingly, compassion. Because she saw in Helena not just the oppressor, but a woman trapped by her own ignorance, her own limitations. "Forgiveness comes from peace, Mrs. Helena. You need to find yours." The words fell into the silence of the small room with the weight of profound truth. Helena received them as both a blow and a comfort. It wasn't the absolution she expected, that easy forgiveness that would clear her conscience. It was something deeper and more difficult, the responsibility to undergo her own transformation, to find her own peace through real change. "But I want to do something," Helena insisted, extending the ring. "Please accept this. As reparation, as..." "No." Joanna's refusal was firm, immediate. "I don't want anything from you, Mrs. Helena. This ring is yours. Keeping it would only remind me of something I want to forget. The only thing I ever wanted from you, you never gave me." "What? What did you want?" "Respect," Joanna said simply. "To be seen as a human being, to be treated with dignity, to have my character recognized after 3 years of honest work. That's what I wanted. And that can't be bought with a ring or with an apology. That's built every day in how we treat people." Helena felt the weight of those words as she had never felt anything before. She looked at Joanna, truly looked, perhaps for the first time. She saw not just the housekeeper who cleaned her home, but a woman with a history, with ancestry, with deep dignity. A woman who, despite all the injustices she had suffered, remained whole. Strong in a way that she, Helena, had never managed to be. "I understand," she finally said, "and I will try to be different. I will try to do things differently, not for you, because I know I have no right to expect your forgiveness, but for myself, because I don't want to be the person I was that day." Joanna nodded slightly. "Then you've learned something, and that's something." Helena stood up, put the ring in her pocket, and left the box of chocolates on the table. Can I offer your job back, with a raise, with—" "No," Joanna cut in again. "I'm not coming back. I couldn't. Not after everything. I've already found another job, a home where I've been treated with respect from day one, where I won't have to constantly prove my honesty." The refusal was like a slap, but Helena deserved it entirely. She nodded, accepting another consequence of her actions. She walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "Joanna, I know I can't change what I did, but I want you to know that I will carry this with me for the rest of my life, and I will do things differently, with the people who work in my house, with everyone. I will try to do things differently." Joanna looked at her, and for a brief moment their eyes truly met. Two women separated by different worlds, by opposite experiences, by social structures that placed them on opposite sides of an abyss. But in that moment, just two human beings, both marked by that event in different ways. "You do that," Joanna said softly. "Not for me, but for the other women like me who will pass through your door. For those who are already there. Treat them like people. That's all we want." Helena nodded, unable to speak. She left that small room carrying much more weight than she had brought. Not the weight of chocolates or the ring, but the weight of an awakened conscience, of shame that doesn't dissipate, of the responsibility to do things differently. Mrs. Selina closed the door behind her and turned to Joanna. "You were too generous with her, child." Joanna shook her head. "I wasn't being generous. I was being fair. She made a mistake, admitted it, apologized. I won't pretend that erases what happened, but I won't carry hate either. Hate weighs too much, Mrs. Selina." "I already carry enough. I don't need more of it." The old woman smiled, proud. "Your grandmother would be proud of you. That woman raised you right, taught you to have backbone but not a heart of stone." Joanna smiled back, tired but relieved. Something within her had been freed in that conversation. She hadn't completely forgiven. Perhaps she never would entirely, but she had freed herself from the need to carry anger. She had chosen to move forward, carrying her dignity intact. That night, she lit 2 candles before her grandmother's portrait. She held the beaded necklace and whispered, "Grandma, you were right. They can accuse us, humiliate us, take our jobs, but they can't take who we are. They can't steal our soul if we don't let them." And for the first time in 2 weeks, she slept in peace. Helena returned home transformed. It wasn't a complete overhaul. Those things take time, constant effort, but something fundamental had shifted. She looked at Marta, the housekeeper who had stayed, with different eyes. She saw not just a role, but a person. She started saying good morning with sincerity, thanking her for her work, acknowledging the humanity in every gesture. She fired Marta weeks later when she discovered Marta had lied about other things, that she had deliberately planted those seeds of suspicion against Joanna. Injustice had accomplices, and Helena could finally see that. She hired another housekeeper, and this time treated her with the respect she should have always offered. She paid well, recognized the work, never accused without proof. She became different. Not perfectly, because no one is, but genuinely different. And she always carried as a reminder and penance the memory of Joanna's face in that simple room, saying with that unshakable dignity, "Forgiveness belongs to those who have peace. You need to find yours." Words that would haunt her forever, but also guide her to be better. The following months were a period of rebuilding for Joanna. Her new job, in the home of a widowed gentleman named Dr. Alvaro, proved to be completely different from anything she had experienced before. He treated her with genuine respect, greeted her every morning, took an interest in her life, always paid on time, and even a little above market rate. "Good work deserves fair compensation," he'd say. There were no cameras watching, no implicit suspicions, no constant tension that had marked her years at the Albuquerque mansion. For the first time, Joanna worked without carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. She managed to bring her younger sister, Conceição, to New York City. Together, they rented a small but decent apartment with 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a tiny backyard where they planted cilantro, basil, mint, and flowers. Little by little, that space became a home. She hung her grandmother's portrait on the wall, set up a simple little altar with candles and saint images, and scattered objects around the apartment that told her story. Life didn't become easy. It never would. She knew well the structural limitations of being a black poor woman in America. But it became dignified. It became hers. Nights became rituals of healing. Joanna would light a candle before her grandmother's portrait, hold her beaded necklace, and give thanks, not for the justice that came late, not for the vengeance she never sought, but for the strength that never abandoned her. For the dignity maintained, the head held high, the soul untouched. "Thank you, Grandma," she'd whisper, "for teaching me that we don't bow down, for giving me these beads that remind me of where I come from, for showing me they can take everything but who I am inside." Conceição, young and full of dreams, started studying at night, taking adult education classes with the hope of one day going to college. Joanna encouraged her, paid for her supplies, and woke up early to make her sister's coffee before she left. In this girl, she saw the possibility of a different future, of breaking cycles. Perhaps Conceição would achieve what she hadn't. Perhaps the next generation would have a slightly lighter load. In the community, Joanna's story spread. Not the lie of the maid who stole, but the truth. The woman unjustly accused who maintained her dignity, who was sought out by her remorseful former employer, who refused to return because she knew her worth. She became a reference point, a silent example of resilience. Other housekeepers sought her out to vent, ask for advice, share their own stories of injustice and struggle. Dr. Alvaro learned of the story through Mrs. Selena, who had visited him one day. The networks of solidarity among the working poor are strong and extensive. He called Joanna in for a chat. "Joanna, I heard about what you went through. I'm so sorry, but I want you to know that here you will always have respect. Always, and if you ever need a reference, help, anything at all, I'll be here." The unexpected kindness brought tears to Joanna's eyes. "Thank you, Doctor. You don't know how much that means." And indeed, he didn't know, not completely. How could he? He had never experienced automatic suspicion, presumed guilt, invisibility that suddenly transformed into accusatory hypervisibility. But he tried to understand, and that effort was already far more than most offered. A year after the false accusation, Joanna was on a bus returning from work when she saw Helena. Her former employer was in a car in traffic, stopped at a light. Their eyes met by accident. Joanna saw recognition in Helena's eyes, saw the shame that still resided there. Helena made a motion, as if to wave, but Joanna simply looked ahead, and the bus moved on when the light turned green. There was no anger in that gesture of ignoring, just indifference. Helena belonged to the past, to a closed chapter. There was no need for reconciliation, contact, or performative forgiveness. There was simply the continuation of life, each woman going her own way, carrying the lessons of that event in different ways. One especially quiet evening, Joanna sat on the porch of their little house with Conceição. They looked up at the sky together, identifying the few stars visible through the light pollution. "Sister," Conceição said, "weren't you ever really angry? About everything they did to you?" Joanna thought before answering. "I was, yes, so much anger. I cried, I screamed alone, I wanted to curse, to lash out, but Grandma taught me that anger is fire. It can warm you or burn you. It depends on how you use it. I used my anger not to give up, not to hang my head, to keep standing, but I didn't let it consume me. Because if I had, Helena would have truly won, not by taking my job, but by taking my peace. And no one can take that if I don't let them. Conceição absorbed those words like one absorbs ancestral wisdom. You're strong, sister, stronger than I think I could be. Joanna smiled, ran her hand through the girl's hair. You're strong too, Conceição. We come from strong women. Great-grandmother, grandmother, mom, me, you. Strength is in our blood, in our bones. You just need to discover it within yourself when your time comes to be tested. Time continued its relentless course. Seasons changed, years passed. Joanna continued working, saving, living a life of dignified simplicity. Conceição finished adult education and got a scholarship to study nursing. The apartment gained more life, more plants, more laughter. Mrs. Selena continued to be the unofficial matriarch of that neighborhood, blessing, advising, welcoming. The community continued its routine of daily struggle and resilience. Dr. Alvaro became an unexpected part of Joanna's life, not as a distant employer, but as someone who genuinely cared. When she fell ill once, he paid for a private doctor. When Conceição needed money for expensive college textbooks, she took an advance on her salary that she never saw repaid. Small kindnesses that restored Joanna's faith in humanity, that proved not everyone was like Helena had been. Helena, for her part, had changed. Not completely. Old habits and ingrained prejudices don't disappear easily. But genuinely, she'd become a champion for workers' rights, volunteering with organizations that helped housekeepers understand their rights. Not for absolution or to clear her conscience. The guilt over what she'd done to Joanna would never fully disappear, but because she finally understood the system of injustice that had enabled her actions, and she wanted to do something to change it. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after the incident, Joanna was in the backyard watering her plants when Conceição arrived with news. Sister, I got accepted. I finished the program. I'm a nurse now. Joanna dropped the hose, hugged her sister tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. Grandma's watching from up there. She's so proud. That night they had a small celebration. They invited Mrs. Selena, Dr. Alvaro, some neighbors, friends from the community. The food was simple but plentiful. There was music, laughter. Amidst the celebration, Joanna stepped away for a moment. She went inside, lit a candle before her grandmother's photo, held the beaded necklace, and spoke softly. Grandma, you always said that those who carry their ancestors in their soul don't bow down. I didn't bow down. I went through the storm, but I didn't bow down. And now, look, Conceição graduated. We have our own home, our dignity intact. You were right. They can take a lot away, but they can't take who we are. Thank you for teaching me that. She returned to the party, eyes glistening but heart full. She looked around, at her sister, the graduate, at her loyal friends, at their humble but love-filled home, at the life she had built, brick by brick, job by job, dignity by dignity. And she smiled. And that's how this simple woman, who just wanted respect, showed that true brilliance isn't in gold, but in the soul. That dignity can't be stolen, bought, or erased by false accusations or cruel injustices. That the black women who clean the world, who sustain it with their calloused hands and immense hearts, carry within them an ancestral strength that no storm can defeat. Joanna Silva never needed to prove her innocence to anyone again, because she always knew deep down who she was. She knew where she came from. She knew the lineage of strong women who preceded her. She wore the beaded necklace around her neck, which was more than an adornment. It was a shield, a root, living memory. And this inner certainty, this unwavering dignity, this refusal to bow even in the face of the greatest injustice, was her true treasure. More valuable than any diamond ring, brighter than any gold, more permanent than any material wealth. Her grandmother's legacy lived in her, and through her it would live in Conceição, and through Conceição it would reach future generations. The chain won't break. Strength is transmitted, dignity is inherited and cultivated. And so, from grandmother to granddaughter, from sister to sister, from woman to woman, the resistance continues. Sometimes silent, sometimes shouting, but always present, always firm, always alive. And you, what did you think of this story? What lesson did it leave for you? Tell us in the comments, and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our stories that move you every day.